Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Wednesday, May 1st. Derek Van Riper, Eno Saris, Britt Giroli here with you one day later than usual. Life happens, as they like to say. On this episode, we've got some news and notes from around the league, including a disappointing turn of events for Mike Trout, who was off to a good start, at least from a power perspective this season. We're going to dig into a home run celebration that would probably draw a health grade F from most municipalities. And we've got a question about the Nats rebuild that we're going to dig into. How far along is the Nationals rebuild? Kind of a big picture question for us today. We're also going to talk about a few early series that we've been excited about that are in progress. And I think each of them got more exciting for different reasons since the time that we put them on the rundown on Monday morning for the show. So lots to dig into today. If you haven't joined the Discord yet, you can do that using the link in the show description. Let's talk about Mike Trout first. This was the fresh news of the day on Tuesday night. Mike Trout has a torn meniscus, 10 homers through 29 games this season. He even stole a base again on Monday night before this injury was announced on Tuesday. Angels making a little shuffle in the outfield, DFAing Aaron Hicks, adding Kevin Pillar as sort of the depth adjustment here. But this is just the latest in a growing list of disappointing mid and later career injuries for Trout that are really keeping him from showing us if he's still even 80 or 90% of the player he was at his peak. Like from a power perspective, and just by the fact that he's being aggressive on the base paths again, I was becoming increasingly optimistic that he was still that guy based on what was happening through the first month of the season.
Yeah, what's awful about it is, I don't know if you guys saw the video, but like you could tell that he was struggling to not cry. Like this is something that I think people forget, that these, because they're like, well, he gets paid anyway. Like these guys care. And I think it was Ken Rosenthal for us at the beginning of the season who did this story with Trout that was like, he really this spring wanted to prove to people that he can still be that guy. Like this in his head was a season that he had targeted as like, you know, I'm going to silence the doubters, the people who said I can't stay healthy and I can't stay on the field and, you know, my best years are behind me. And then he goes out and he has a ridiculous start. I mean, you look at what he's done home run wise, and I think there are some teams that are pretty close to him in terms of team home runs. When I wrote the White Sox column, they only had like 3 more home runs than Mike Trout through the first month of the season. So really frustrating. I think even if you're not an Angels fan, if you're a baseball fan, because unfortunately, you know, people are going to say, well, it's the same old thing. Can't stay healthy. Yes, it's not season ending. I think 4 to 6 weeks was the initial timeline, but you wonder, you know, 4 to 6 weeks. And then does he rehab to come back? Right. Like, is this something that kind of lingers all year at his age? It really sucks. There's no other way to put it. I enjoy watching him. I felt like he was a man on a mission this year and he looked like it for that first month. And now we're not going to get to see that anymore. And whether or not the Angels were going to be a playoff team or not, it's still exciting to watch the best player in the game play on a nightly basis. And we're just not going to see that. And I just wonder how much this accumulated injuries over time, it's just going to continue to compound itself. It's the back, it's the leg, it's the knee, right? Like he's older than he even appears to be, I think, because of all the injuries that he suffered. So I wonder how we're going to look at his career. Are we going to look at it as what could have been? Because no doubt he's a Hall of Famer, but are we going to say, what if he had stayed healthy? I think that's going to be a huge part of his legacy.
Yeah, it's sad. The news actually came down while I was talking to Brent Rooker about injuries across the sport and even hitter injuries. And we were talking about just the fact that these players are pushing themselves as far as they can go. You know, we just saw that Tristan Casas has, internal injuries akin to being in a car crash because he's turning so fast. And, when I look at Mike Trout, I see a guy who looks like a free safety, looks like a linebacker. And, you know, he's really pushed himself to swing the bat as hard as he can, run as fast as he can. And I think we're seeing some of that kind of, it's a little bit like, you know, guys throwing as hard as they can every single time. You know, he's been, when he's in, he plays as hard as he can. And it's too bad because if I don't know if he's necessarily the very best player in the sport anymore, but by WRC Plus, which is just a park adjusted number for offense, Aaron Judge, this is the over the last 3 years, Aaron Judge, Yordan Alvarez, Jose Altuve, Shohei Ohtani, Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, Mike Trout. That is the top 7 They all have like 1,200 plate appearances or more. He's about 300 plate appearances behind most of them, even Aaron Judge. So, yeah, it's definitely part of his legacy. I think he's a Hall of Famer already. I think he would have been kind of an inner circle kind of, in the same sentences as Babe Ruth and Barry Bonds. Now I think he's more a guy you talk about Mickey Mantle. That's not that far off. Like a Sandy Koufax package, I don't think, where he's good for like 5 or 6 years and what could have been. But he still has some work to do to get into even the Mickey Mantle territory. He's about 30 WAR short of Mickey Mantle. So we got to hope for some better health from him. Maybe just stick him at DH. Like maybe preemptively say, hey, we're trying to keep you healthy. Can you just bat for us?
Well, I think that's a big part of it, or even just doing that more part-time, which was never an option when Ohtani was there, because that was the spot Ohtani had. I'm surprised to see this. If you look at Mike Trout's career, he's played over 1,400 games in the big leagues, only 81 appearances as a DH. Like that's, because of his initially, he had a lot of value as a defensive center fielder. He likes playing there. Yeah.
He wanted to play center. Yeah.
But at some point, if you say one way we can take some of the wear and tear off your legs, people underestimate how much outfielders are running and moving around during a game.
And center field runs more because they cover more.
Some guys don't like that though. Some guys feel like it translates into their at bats and they're not as locked into the game.
There's a statistical component to that. It's called the DH penalty. You are 10% worse than you are normally if you're not playing in the field.
Yeah. So, because you're sitting there, you're sitting on each at bat. You're not you can impact the game and make a great catch after you strike out with the bases loaded,
warm
right?
Too. You're staying warm, physically.
So I don't know actually if the stop and start for Mike Trout keeps him that much healthier. I don't know.
Could you play him at first base? I mean, we saw Bryce Harper make that move.
That's a good idea.
I think that's sort of the compromise. You're still moving around. You're not as inactive. I mean, DHs have things they can do. They can go underneath the tunnel and ride a stationary bike and do stuff like that if they want to stay loose. It's not the same. But I think
JD Davis pointed out to me, if you do that, you're not acclimated to the lights. So there's actually this weird part where somebody says, "Hey, you're up," and you come from in the tunnel in the dark, and you're like, "Gah!"
Can't see anything. Yeah, that's a good point. I just don't. Yeah, I think first base is a good compromise. I don't know if you can put him as DH and that solves all your problems. Then you're also clogging the DH spot for the Angels. For guys who need a blow.
They've been used to that.
They've lived that life for a while.
Teams don't like that, though. Teams would prefer to be able to use that to give guys a blow.
I think the first base plan would be the thing I would try to go to Trout with. I'd say let's do what the Phillies did with Bryce Harper. Let's just see if we can get you back to 130, 140 games by taking wear and tear off your legs. Show him with data. Show him how much he's moving in the outfield versus how much he'll still move at first base by comparison. It's not going to, people have this impression that first basemen are statues. They're not.
No. But I think you run in the outfield, you run a couple miles a game. Mm-hmm. And I don't think first basemen are running a couple miles a game.
No, it's less, but it's probably the happy medium. And for all of the things that we just said about Trout, there's a few things that still jump off the page statistically. More stolen bases in 29 games this season. He had 6 already in 7 attempts than he had in the last 3 seasons combined. Yeah. He had 5 over the last 3 seasons together. Lowest strikeout rate for Mike Trout.
What Britt is talking about.
Yeah, he was motivated.
Yeah,
he was there.
Everybody, I'm still here.
Yeah, he wanted to kind of silence the doubters. I thought he was a little spicier than we've ever seen with some of his quotes this spring.
That's true.
He just did a Q&A with Sam Blum last week that went up on The Athletic as well. Lowest strikeout rate that we've seen since 2019 for Mike Trout. So hopefully on the other side of this meniscus injury, 4 or 6 weeks from now, 2 months from now, whatever it ends up being, we can see a nice productive second half from him. A little bit of a flyby here. We knew things weren't going well for José Abreu in Houston. They decided to option him to West Palm Beach, their rookie level affiliate, which is basically a way to getting him back to their spring complex to let him sort of revamp his swing. Given that he's a veteran with, I think it's 5 years service time, he had to approve this. So something that he and the organization sort of came to an agreement on. I'm just wondering if it's going to work. Are we going to see José Abreu figure it out, mechanically rebuild his swing, come back and offer something to the Astros later on this season? Or is this just sort of the first step on the way out the door for an early release? Because Britt, you suggested they would just eat the contract. I thought they were going to try and suck it up, get through this season, and then maybe cut bait early next year if they couldn't get him back on track.
Well, I think this is them going through like you said, the first step, right? Now, what's fascinating is he had to agree to this.
Mm-hmm.
Like he could have said, nah, forget you. But he, has said to reporters, and Chandler Rome had a good story about this, about how embarrassing this is and how he wants to put things back together. And it's been such a dramatic tumble for a guy who was a Silver Slugger and an MVP to this. I do think this still ends in a DFA. The other factor is he's not even helping them on the field. He's like a -3 defensive runs saved. So he's killing them. And the Astros are, as we know, not off to a great start. So good on him for agreeing to do this. I don't know how many players would have been okay with this. I do think there is some pride there. And like he said, he is embarrassed. I'm not sure he can get back to that prior form, right? Like, what is it that needs to be unlocked that the Astros have done such a good job of maximizing these guys? What is it that, Troy Snicker and the rest of their coaches can't figure out? That to me is a little confounding. And I feel like we're going to look at this contract, which was made by Jim Crane. Remember, they signed him before they had a GM. This is when they had got rid of James Click. We're going to look back on this deal and say this was one of the worst deals that they've made in recent history, and they've avoided these deals, right? But there was no GM, and there was an owner who loves stars, and this is going to end up blowing up in their face. So no, I'm not super optimistic about this. I think it's a good first move, but what do you do? How long does he stay down there? What does he have to do? It's so hard to evaluate how guys do in the minor leagues. We just saw Jackson Holiday. So what does he have to do? Crush at the West Palm the Gulf Coast League? What does he do? Does he move?
What is that going to mean?
System? Right. Does he feel good about himself? Because I don't think it's like a confidence thing, right? He's not a 22-year-old kid. So what? He's going to tear it up in their AAA? What are they, Sugarland? And then you bring him up, and he has a couple games.
I think maybe
I don't know what this does besides buy time.
Organizationally, I think they're going to figure out what they have in Loperfido a little bit. If you can get a month before Abreu says, hey, what's going on? A month is actually a decent amount of time. People make decisions on a month. We see young kids get a month before they go back down. We see people do waiver claims, give them a month and then let them go. A month is enough time to see what you can see certain things in batted ball stats. For example, in a month, a barrel rate is important. Abreu has not hit a barrel in the first month. Yeah. And so that's important. We're about to get bat speed numbers from Baseball Savant in the next couple of weeks. And when we do get those numbers, I will assume that we will see that Abreu's bat speed is in the bottom quartile of the league and that he's lost his bat speed. That's what I see when I don't see a max EV over 109. He's always had one over 113 in the past. When I don't see barrels, when I see a hard hit rate at 27%, the worst of his career. And I think this was a long time coming because we all remember last year he started out poorly and then he kind of rallied. But when he rallied, I think he did enough to say, he got it back. He got it back. Well, his rallying, that second half where he rallied, quote unquote, he was 9% above league average. That's basically average for a first baseman.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, it would have been his worst career season if he had done that. Like what he did in the second half last year was also worse than he was before. So we already kind of saw, his rallying, like his bounce is more of the cat variety than the he's back variety, and so I think we saw basically last year the harbingers of what's happening now. So it's on Loperfido to hit the ball hard and show them that he can be above average first baseman. And then I think you're right. I think it's headed for the DFA.
Do you guys think you could barrel up a ball in 1 month?
No.
I don't either.
No.
My max exit velocity, I know this because I did a little bit of training,
Wait, can we guess?
74.
Ah,
All right.
74.
Just let everyone know when you think you can play better. When you're screaming at the TV saying you think you can still do better.
Or when me as an analyst, I'm like, well, he has to hit a ball 110, so he's totally toast.
Yeah.
I've hit a ball 74.
They're literally
Would that even bruise if it hit me,
You'd be able to just get out of the way. I don't think it'd hit you.
Yeah, you could see it coming.
You're just gonna dodge it.
Oh gosh. And I loved how you said it takes a month for people to make decisions is a good chunk, except for Peter Bendix. Did you guys see that press conference with the Marlins?
I did not see the Peter Bendix press conference.
Yesterday,
was he talking about his catchers?
Oh, yesterday people were asking him. They're the worst. I think, are they the worst team in baseball right now? I didn't check this morning.
Oh boy.
Them and the White Sox have been duking it out. Peter Bendix basically said yesterday, and this made the rounds.
They have one more win than the White Sox
on social media, that a month isn't enough time to make any decisions, that they, he's still optimistic that they're going to turn it around this year. And that he just kept hammering that a month wasn't enough time for him to, make some roster moves, to shake things up. And, people are a little upset by this because they didn't upgrade the major league roster at all either, So I think the plan for him is, give me 5 years.
Yeah, he's on
But you only gave Kim Ing 1.
Yeah,
2.
no. Yeah.
They, as an organization,
it's a double standard. You're right.
Definitely a double standard. What buttons are you pressing? Like, the state of the organization was they were lucky to get to the playoffs last year. There was still work to be done.
Oh, I mean,
it's a partially built roster because they've had injuries. They've had major injuries to key pitchers.
Yeah,
true.
Like, strength is pitching, and they've lost key pitchers. So the position.
I think my month comment is a little bit more about a single player. If you take 26 players, then you're multiplying all the noise,
But to not make any, I think, shakeups at all has kind of bothered people. And then they sent down that one. Who is Lopez?
We do know from sourced reporting that they are talking, and that they are considering moves. It's not like we know that Arias is semi on the block.
Right. We know that's happening. I mean, is Josh Bell going to be a Marlin at the end of the season? Probably not.
No.
Luis Arias, probably.
But who does he have to call up to be like, Bell?
That's what I'm saying. I don't think there's that many toggles other than bringing back Max Meyer, and then of course Max Meyer gets knocked around a little bit at AAA. They have him working on his pitch mix. He's not throwing his slider as much as he did when he was with the big league club. So there's the adjustment there.
Oh, is that really what's happened?
That's what happened in his last outing.
Oh, interesting.
But it reeks of a rebuild, and no one is talking about that. They're like, well, in the short term, we're going to turn it around. I think be honest and own up to people that it's going to take 5 years. If that's what you were tasked with, cutting payroll, going more heavy into analytics, and having a down couple seasons, just be honest with people.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Let's get to a new home run celebration in Minnesota, because I haven't seen a lot of celebrations with food. I just wanted to get a kind of fair foul assessment from each of you on this one. I'm glad we got confirmation from Rocco Baldelli on this. The sausage that you've seen the Twins tossing around after home runs, courtesy of Ryan Jeffers, is a summer tangy sausage. Rocco's head's in the right place, because he was talking about his concerns that when the packaging opens, they're still keeping this thing in the plastic. It's going to be a problem. It's going to smell because it hasn't been refrigerated. It's been at a warm temperature. It's probably cooled off at night, warmed up again. Not really the way you want to store even a very well-preserved meat like a summer tangy sausage. So where does this rank
gross
on your scale of bad and gross home run celebrations?
This is the first, what other home run celebrations have been? Oh, I know what's a little bit gross. The Homer hose. They're all that's a little gross. I mean, that's if there was COVID, they'd all get it pretty quickly.
Actually, you said that, and I was paying attention. I've been at the last 2 games with the Yankees, and they don't put their mouth on it. They just take it like a hose.
Squirt it out.
Yeah, when you're drinking out of the hose, when you were a little kid, you didn't physically put your mouth on the hose. You just kind of got the water.
Okay. All right. That makes it a little bit. So Homer hose is a 1 grossness factor. The sausage is an 8 or 9, and I don't know that there's any in between. And every other one is 0. What other one has been gross?
An 8 or a 9. An 8 or a 9 would be if they started eating it. That would be
no. I'm with 8 or a 9. It's gonna start growing things.
It's gonna be green soon.
Listen, I'm all for the wacky home run celebrations, but does it have to involve E. coli?
No.
You're right.
No. We don't want that. So
all the Twins are out
with a stomach bug.
Yeah. It's not going to make it to summer. It's May already. Maybe that was an April celebration. A little cool this time of year. You can get away with it. It's warming up now.
There's a little bit of a corollary for me. We have a little league team in our league that has taken an empty water bottle, just obviously just trash, and tied it to a stick, and that's their mascot. And they are undefeated, I believe. And so there is, I think the value is, people I think want to ascribe the value of something like this to superstition and like sort of belief that we can win because we have the Homer sausage or the Homer trash thing. I think what it actually is shared experience. I think it's the value of shared experience, because teams are disparate groups where you have little cliques. You have the starting pitchers, you have the guys who only speak Spanish playing cards, you have these little cliques in clubhouses that you can kind of identify almost by walking in the door. You see little groupings of people. If you have something like this, it's something that they all are experiencing together. And so I think that's what sort of brings them together. It's a team building experience a little bit more than like a superstition, like wearing the same underwear over and over again.
Right, which is just that's 9 out of
that's
10.
Kind of gross.
10 out of 10 gross. Stop wearing the same underwear every day. The summer tangy sausage it's unique. I'll give them that. It's not nearly as good. Last year they had a good celebration. They had the fishing vest. It was the land of 10,000 rakes, because they called Minnesota the land of 10,000 lakes. Fun fact: Wisconsin has more lakes than Minnesota. Yes, I live on that side of the border. Here to educate.
Regional rivalry inserted.
I know. Jeez.
I like Minnesota so much. Like it's weird. Like I find it to be the silliest rivalry of all. The fact that people on opposite sides of that border have any sort of bitterness towards each other. It's passive aggressive most of the time anyway, because that's how we feel in this part of the country.
That's how the Midwest rolls.
That's how we roll. One other aesthetic question for you. I think you're right. The shared experience makes a lot of sense. More City Connect uniforms dropped, and I'm waiting for these to be a total disaster because of the other uniform problems we're experiencing this year. So here's, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see them. We got the Mets and we have the Rays, a lot of gray. Interesting thing that you might be able to see on this particular shot, I noticed that they've got the bridge on the Mets cap. That's a nice pull.
They even have
a really good design.
City
Similar to what they do.
Batting helmets.
Yeah, they got it on the batting helmets too. I think that's a really nice touch. I think that's a way to like take something that's a little bit like bland by color, but make it really interesting by design. So I think those are probably a thumbs up for me as a neutral. I don't have a rooting interest with the Mets or anything
another
like
thing
that.
that's hard to see if you're looking on YouTube right now and you haven't seen the Rays one is that it's not black or white or gray. It's like black with it's supposed to kind of look like
it looks like a chalkboard.
Yeah,
after you erase the chalkboard, there's still remnants of chalk on it. That's sort of the texture of it.
Or also like asphalt.
Yeah,
because it's like a skateboarding kind of graffiti thing going on. I also like their hats. Their hat is the bridge as well, but it's a ray. It's like a ray with a bridge on it. It's a pretty cool hat. These, I think, are automatically, they rise to the top 2 or 3 in the sport. And they might rescue the whole enterprise, because I have to look at the San Francisco ones, which I think are bottom 2 or 3 in the sport. I mean, these things are these awful creamsicle, just they look terrible, and they don't really make me think of the city at all. Like it's like all white, and like I get the fog idea, but then make it gray. Like I don't. It doesn't make any sense to me. It looks awful. I think I saw there were these 3 guys behind home plate in a game I covered recently that wore the whole City Connects head to toe with their own name on the back of their jerseys. And I couldn't help myself. I pointed and laughed.
That's rude, man.
It's pretty rude, but I was like, look at those guys.
Yikes. I'm going to agree with you. I honestly put the Rays hat at 1 for City Connects. I don't know if there's a better hat.
Nationals are pretty good too.
I put the Nats. I think when you go with jerseys, we're going with uniforms. The top 3 to me are the Nats, the Padres, and the Rays, and I don't have an order for them. I think I appreciate them all in different ways. They're creative. They're cool. Is right. We haven't had a real big hit, it feels like, since the Nats or the Padres, whichever one came most recently.
I think the Philly one is pretty bad, actually.
The Philly one is awful. Like,
the
I think the
Dodgers
Mets
one is terrible.
hat,
They just put Lois in front of their, like, it's just
no risk at all. And I
Yeah.
think the Mets hat is good, but I think the uniform top is safe.
it's really
It's
safe.
very safe. It's not bad, just
And
very
I think
safe.
Baltimore went with safe to
Also
to
safe.
bad. It's just a white. It's just a black jersey with Baltimore and white and across it. Like,
well, Baltimore is in like rainbow-ish colors, and it's like you can't clip these wings, and like
that's
it's bad.
not good, dude.
They had so many cooler things they could have done. I think.
I think
And, like,
Texas
people-
is safe and boring.
With the Mahjong
Yeah.
tile? Yeah.
Well, at least they tried a little bit. Like, to me, if you're going to take a risk, take a risk. And I think the Rays just did it the right way. Like, I'm going to get a hat. I might even get a jersey too. Like, and I haven't bought anything. I think they're awesome. I think they're really cool looking.
The San Diego ones are popular in our household. We have a bunch of San Diego City Connects. We even have a City Connect poncho. That's being passed around the family.
My family's out there, and like I've been to a decent amount of games, and I feel like it is very common to see those in the stands.
I guess Colorado's okay.
I don't dig those.
Everyone else is just okay to me. I don't know. Do you guys have anyone else in the top 3?
The Brewer ones are okay. I don't know if they're as good as some of the better ones, but they're not. They're not bad. It's the light blue with the Brew Crew. It kind of looks like the Santa Cruz logo lettering on it, which is if you've seen that stuff, you'll.
Wrigleyville is bad. I would want to put the White Sox one in the top 3 or fighting for it. I like the White Sox one. It's safe and it's kind of boring, but it's cool. I think it looks cool. I don't know. It's like I would want one kind of.
If I had to pick a City Connect jersey to wear every day for a month, I would want the Nationals Cherry Blossoms.
It's a good one.
Get me a Victor Robles one. I'll own it. I'll wear it every day for a month. DJ Maxx, $29.99. Send it my way. I'll pay you back on Venmo. Make it happen.
I guess Brew Crew kind of.
See if I find one around here.
The Brew Crew reminds you of the old Brewers jerseys a little bit.
Yeah, they're a little bit of a throwback. Miami's red ones aren't bad. Those are
they're kind of like soccer jerseys. Yeah, those are not bad.
Those were a nod to the Sugar Kings.
Talking about top 5-ish stuff here. That's the next 3 might be Milwaukee, the White Sox, and the Marlins. Yeah,
I like the Marlins ones too.
I think a lot of them are just kind of like, that's fine, and that's good enough. But the ones that are bad are bad. I think the Philly ones are pretty bad.
Philly, Philly already has so many cool, like the powder blue, like the alternate jerseys, that like it was just going to be hard to do another like, oh man, must have this, Yeah,
the regular jerseys are pretty cool. I like the regular jerseys.
Every team that has good regular uniforms struggles with all of this happens across other sports.
Wrigleyville.
Yeah, like
I like the Cubs pinstripes, and then Wrigleyville, you're like, ugh.
Or the Dodgers, like really?
The Dodgers ones are stupid. In football, this happens when they do the colorway of jerseys. Packers stuff never looks right. Like the Packers green and gold stuff looks the way it does, and it's great. Yeah. Every weird jersey they wear looks stupid. Mm-hmm. This happens across every sport.
Is this going to end, or are we going to deal with City Connects forever? Like once they hit all the teams, are we done?
They'll call it something else. They'll make up a new name. I don't know what they'll call it, jerseys of the future or double inverted retro. Like they'll come up with some stupid name and start a whole new series every single time, like clockwork.
We already have like the camo on, like we already have the Mother's Day and the Father's Day, and like at some point we tapped out, or no? I guess no. Capitalism has no limit.
There's no limit. No, we will continue making new uniforms.
Oh God, the military ones. Ugh.
I know
the camo. Nope.
Not a fan. Nope. Let's move on to the Nationals rebuild, since we're talking about those cherry blossom jerseys, which have been retired, right? They're not using those anymore.
Really?
Well, they're going to be retired after this year if they haven't.
Okay, I was like, I thought they wore them.
I think they're wearing them this year, but I heard they're retiring them. It's like you're taking the best jersey that you've had in your franchise's brief history, and you're just stopping. Sure. Supply chain issues, I guess. It's hard to make a lot of those cherry blossoms, apparently. But
that is the reason they're not doing player weekend jerseys, because they can't get pants for the regular game.
They're still struggling to find pants that don't rip off their butts.
So they announced they're redoing players weekend. They're bringing it back, but they're not letting players make their nicknames on their jerseys because they can't get the jerseys in time.
Sounds about right. So big question for the day. How far along is this Nationals rebuild? Are things going well in DC? I mean, Britt, you're there. You're witnessing this firsthand. I think about them as having a good head start on a rebuild because they've done well in the Juan Soto trade in particular, right? They didn't crush every single player in the deal, but James Wood looks like he is going to be a well above average regular, if not a star. So to get a player like that back and to get Mackenzie Gore and to get other guys that should at least play in the big leagues, that's a nice haul. And when you hit a trade like that and get it right, and you get some early draft picks you connect on. Oh, and CJ Abrams looks amazing too. Like that's a franchise altering trade when you get it right. And it can be a franchise altering or destroying trade when you get it wrong. Am I putting too much weight on that? Because I think you look at that plus like Brady House and the way that system's starting to come together, Dylan Cruz, their first rounder last year, it looks like their core might be coming together a little faster than most rebuilds.
Yeah, well, it's tough because just down the street is the Orioles, who I feel like rebuild was like supercharged, right?
This took a long time though. Like it's hit this crazy high level, but that took a long time to do.
Yeah, but they were really good last year, and they were really good the second half of 2022. So if you look at it, they bottomed out in 18, 19, 20 is kind of a wash, and 21. So it really wasn't that bad. It wasn't like they rebuilt for 7 years. They were just so bad. So I think the Nationals, if you consider in 19, they win the World Series. 20, let's call it a wash. They were terrible. 21 is when they really were like, okay, let's fire sale, right? They started trading guys. Scherzer and Turner went at the deadline that year. And then, of course, Juan Soto goes in 2022. And so I do think they're moving quickly. I think next year is going to be the key because if they kind of sent out the bat signal, right, in not really improving the major league roster and saying like, hey, let's see how these guys do. We think we're still a year away from even trying to supplement. But I think if they're going to have these guys continue to improve the way they have, and they've played well. You look at their record, and honestly, they could easily have like 3 more wins. They had a couple games that were decided by like a bad call or a bad bounce. So you look at how they've been able to perform, and I agree with you. Look, they don't make that Juan Soto trade. They are 5 years behind as an organization. And people didn't think at the time that Mike Rizzo could even win that trade. People were like, you can't trade Juan Soto for anything. But because AJ Preller exists, they were able to get so many guys. And I've heard numerous times that that people in the Padres organization were pounding the table saying, don't include James Wood, who was 18 at the time, and obviously he had that high ceiling, but you never know the guy that young, what they're going to be. And he's looking like you said, he's still looking like he's going to be the centerpiece of that deal in terms of his ceiling talent-wise. Let's not also forget that Cade Cavalli, rehabbing from Tommy John surgery, could be a factor next year too. So I do think the rebuild is headed in the right direction. My main question with them remains, are they going to be able to consistently develop? Because the Orioles, their rebuild is over, but their pipeline is so good because not only did they pick first, and yes, they tanked their way to winning, but some of these guys that are coming out weren't these like top heralded guys. Like look at Ryan O'Hearn and what he was able to do, right? Look at Colton Cowser. These are not like the Adley Rutschman picks of the draft. So I do think for the Nationals to truly take that next step, they have to be able to draft and develop. And there are some signs for the first time since I was there in 19, you look around and you can see some guys who are homegrown on the big league roster. The question is, can they keep that pipeline going? And have they finally figured out a way to develop the guys? Because they revamped that player development system again. And I think they knew it was a problem. And if they're not able to develop these guys, then all these guys you got in the trade are great and all, but they're not going to improve the way you need them to improve. So I think this is a big year for the Nationals coaching staff, the big league staff and the minor leagues, to get these guys better and see where you go from here. Like if these guys are coming up and they're getting shelled and they're regressing, I don't think you can blame the Dodgers or the Padres for sending you like bad goods, right? It's on the Nationals to continue these guys' development, to finish them as players. And if they can do that, I think next year they can start to be a fringy wildcard team if they go out and supplement that roster appropriately.
Yeah, I am ill prepared to say nice things about the Nationals.
Player development.
I've been saying bad things all along, but I have to say they deserve some flowers. And this is what I really, really was surprised by this. The Washington Nationals right now have the third best pitching staff in baseball.
That is That's a mind-blowing first month stat because
exactly, yes.
Even though it's only a month,
I'm speechless.
You couldn't have seen that coming. Even if you're trying to say, what spicy take can I put out there for the first month of the season? What small sample size voodoo can I get lucky with? You still wouldn't have picked that.
No, but aren't the Red Sox up there too?
But I bold predicted the Red Sox to having a good pitching staff. But what I said was it would be top 5 in the American League, not second best in all of baseball as they are right now.
They're in their best start in 100 years or something, pitching staff wise.
Yeah.
So April is a little bit of a fooler.
It is. So yeah. I do think there's some long-term question marks on the pitching side, but the fact that they've gotten it to this point, I think speaks well of Mackenzie Gore is now, I think, hitting sort of 60 and 70th percentile outcomes for himself. They didn't screw him up. One thing you can't do in player development is screw people up. You can't be too much in it and twist too many dials. And that's kind of what was going on with Mackenzie Gore in San Diego, if you ask me. Too many dials were being pressed, too many buttons were being pressed, and he didn't know what the hell was going on. And now it's been more simplified, and he's one of the better outcomes for himself that you could see. And I think that speaks well to adding Sean Doolittle, changing up the processes a little bit, being a little bit more statistic forward and progressive as an organization. So that speaks well of that. So maybe Cade Cavalli will come out of this rehab and be one of the better versions of Cade Cavalli. Maybe that's possible. If that is possible, their batting right now is what's behind. Right now they're the 19th best in position player WAR, and by WRC plus, they are 20th. So they're a bottom third team offensively, and that's where the excitement is. You still got James Wood and Dylan Cruz coming, So I think they are set up. And then the last bit, the money bit, which is something that usually bring up. I think it's hard to know what they will do in a post TV agreement environment. If they will go back to their spending ways, but they have $62 million on their payroll next year, of which $35 million goes to Steven Strasburg. So they are about to get really, really cheap. And maybe everything lines up for 2027 being a big spending year, or maybe even in 25 and 26, they start spending because they know in 27, they're going to get $35 million back, Yeah.
Well, they also restructured that deal a little bit when he agreed to retire. They deferred some of it because it is crushing them. Yeah. And so Patrick Corbin, the big deal is Patrick Corbin is up after this year.
That's another part of it.
That takes off a big load. Yeah.
I mean, the only person on a regular contract in 2025 is Keibert Ruiz for $5.4 million.
Yeah.
And an option extension on Joey Gallo for $8 million.
Yeah.
That will not be exercised.
No, I think you got to spend starting next year, even if it's just a little bit to show these guys that you believe.
And it's going to be, you know what it's going to be? It's going to be what they did last time. It's going to be a starting pitcher. That's how I see it. I see
ownership
them buying
loves the free agent starters. They do.
It's super interesting.
He signed some of the better deals. Strasburg might be one of the worst deals. The second Strasburg. The first Strasburg deal wasn't that bad. And the Scherzer deal might be one of the best free agent deals for a starting pitcher ever.
Yeah, I agree. And when they got Corbin, it was seen as a coup, and they wouldn't have won the World Series.
And that was one of the worst ones, I think.
Yeah, and now it is. But that first year they got him in 19, it wasn't.
Right, exactly. So I could see him playing in the starting pitcher market next year, and maybe adding some bats. But I don't know if he'll go buy Juan Soto back or anything.
No, I don't think they're going to that sort of spending level. I think you're right to question whether or not they'll go back to earlier payroll levels. That might be something that a new ownership group down the road would end up doing, but
Yeah, do
Don't
they
know
get
if this current
sold
one
when
will
they're
do it.
at their leanest? Do they get sold when they're have a $50 million payroll and all the they're a bunch of
Clean
kids?
sheets.
Well,
Might be.
yes
Clean
and
sheets.
no, though, because you can argue that if they still had Juan Soto, ownership would like the new owners would like having a star. I think they have to figure out the Masson situation because when the Orioles changed hands, David Rubenstein took over the beginning of this month. The one of his top to-dos was figuring out Masson. And I think once they figure out the TV rights, like are the Nationals going to own them? Are they going to sell them to MLB? Is the money going to go up that they're going to be owed? That I think has a big part in all of
I
this.
think that's probably hanging over both the Orioles and Nationals when it comes to spending. With the Nationals, it's harder to see because they're in rebuilding and they wouldn't be spending much anyway. But for us to all yell at the Orioles for not spending, maybe some part of it is we don't know how much money we're going to get from our TV deal, which is then puts them in the bucket of the Rangers and the D-backs and the Padres where, they are all kind of wondering how much money they get from the TV deal. It's hard to spend when you don't know exactly what's coming in.
If I said the Nats are a playoff contender in 2026, based on where things sit today, is that fair?
It's not impossible, dude.
I believe you.
Wild card, yeah.
Yeah.
So
I don't know if
they
they're
could
going
be
to win the
fringy
division
next year.
Right,
I think
they
they
could
could
be like a
win 70 games.
Like maybe a 500 team if everything goes well next year, and then playoff contention the year after.
I mean, I'm here to say that, I guess I'm wrong about them. This is way better. It's funny how CJ Abrams breakout and Gore kind of, pitching well. It might just be enough to sort of change my opinion. Plus, their balance sheets are so. I'm surprised at how clear. I kind of in my head was like, oh, they have all that deferred money. They're going to be doing with it forever. And now you look down, you're like, oh, they have 2 more years with Strasburg. That's it.
Yeah, they owe Scherzer some money, but it's small.
I was going to say.
Why is that not showing up on?
I don't know. They owe Scherzer money because he deferred a bunch of it, but it's not a lot. I don't think.
A lot of deferrals in that organization.
They love deferrals. So strangely, they offered Soto no deferrals when they offered him that 440. So yeah, I think they could be like the Orioles, where next year at the end of the year they're playing really well, and we're like, ooh, not enough to get there, but kind of exciting to watch these guys. And then the following year, you're like, okay, I don't think they're going to maybe go out and win the NL East, but look at the Phillies. The Phillies are going to the window is now on the Phillies. And so you're like, is there a path?
And what's the Mets sort of up and down? What's the Mets plan look like?
Here's your spicy toss-up question: who makes the playoffs sooner, the Mets or the Nationals?
Right.
I think you'd assume the Mets because they're already in a position right now.
They're also just spending much more.
They're in the middle, deeper pockets. We trust that they're going to put it all together the right way. With the Nationals, there's a few more questions, but things do seem to be trending in the right direction, because if they're going to keep the pace long term in that division, it seems like some combination of 3 out of Atlanta, Philly, and the Mets and the Nats will be consistently good. The Marlins will be the up and down team that doesn't spend, that when they're good, they're a problem. When they're not, they're a doormat. That's a tough place to win consistently if you don't develop and hit on waiver claims and minor trades.
I kind of want to see a little bit more success on the pitching side. I'm watching Cade Cavalli pretty closely because they don't have any pitching prospects, in their top sort of 10 prospects there's no pitching name that we're waiting for,
besides Cade.
Yeah, besides Cade,
yeah.
Whereas the Orioles, you look at them, they have a ton of bats. We talk about all the bats. They have extra bats. They have Norby. They have Mayo. They have they have more bats to come. But one thing that doesn't get talked about as much about the Orioles is they actually have some interesting arms too, in Armbrister and Cade Povich, and there's some guys coming up that are interesting too there that I would rank ahead. I might put Povich ahead of Cade Cavalli, and he's the guy that people don't talk about.
I think the other thing that's a little underrated about what the Orioles have done is that they get good mileage out of guys like Dean Kramer and Tyler Wells. I realize they're not aces. They're not 200 inning starters. Very few guys are anymore.
To succeed, only what they can get out of them.
But
Kramer looks legit. Yeah,
he looks like at least a good back end starter. Wells for the first half of last year was like a 3.10 ERA with a near 1 WHIP. Like that, even for a half season, is really valuable, and you can pull guys like that into roles and get that kind of results. So if the Nats can start to find ways to do things like that, that would be one way to sort of bridge some of the gap between the lack of prospects and then the kind of top heavy nature of their pitching staff right now.
Someone to watch also is Josiah Gray. What will they do with him? He's been okay at times as a starter. Would he be better in like a 3-inning stint? Would you be a better reliever? It seems like, there's some potential in there, but the fastball is not that good. So maybe he just needs to be a reliever and throw it really hard, so that the shape doesn't matter as much, So there's Josiah Gray and Kate Cavalli have a lot to say, I think, in the next few months about where this organization is going pitching wise.
And they may not even run a runway as starters until after next season, which just based on the depth or lack of depth means they've got time to figure it out. Sometimes that ends up being all you need as a starting pitcher. A few early season series that caught our interest. We'll get to these kind of as a flyby. Orioles-Yankees, like we said a few weeks ago, this was a potential budding rivalry in the AL East. Britt, you were on hand for at least the first game of that series on Monday. That was a Grayson Rodriguez, strong pitching performance against the Yankees lineup that was putting tons of runs on the board over the weekend. So what did you see at the Yard on Monday night?
I saw the Orioles pitch really well. I mean, it's crazy because they had lost 2 of 3 to Oakland. Obviously, the big deal was Craig Kimbrell having, back issues. But you look not only at Monday, but last night too, and they've pitched. They've pitched really well. They've played these close games against the Yankees and really missing now their 2 best relievers because Bautista is out, as we know, and now down Kimbrell, and they've been able to piece it together. And I think, the highlight of that first game is going to be Gunnar Henderson hitting another home run before he's 22. The guy's a star. There's no question about that. But I think, and Brandon Hyde said this after last night's game, the fact that they've been able to hang with them relief pitching wise, because they were really beat up coming out of that Oakland series, and take the first 2. So at worst, they get a split here in a huge series. I think speaks volumes about this Orioles team, right? Because they're young and, we're still wondering how they respond to adversity. And I think you look at games like the last 2 nights and you're like, okay, this team has it. They have it going on. And what I thought was so interesting, we talked about Kramer. He had a little incident. I don't know if you guys saw with Juan Soto last night. Soto hits this mammoth shot. I think it was the first one onto Utah Street this season. And he stares at Kramer. And then after the game, he said, well, Kramer didn't like my Soto shuffle, so I felt the need to stare at him, which I thought was a little bush league and a loss. Maybe keep the smack talk to yourself, right?
The Orioles fans definitely were like, and you lost.
Yeah, something after you win, you could kind of like throw the shade that way, but they didn't win, and I don't think they were up the whole game. I don't know.
Well, Soto this year has been more rambunctious, I think, than usual. Like he's
got an edge.
Yeah, he's been throwing the bat a little harder on homers. He's been more sort of outspoken, and I don't know if it's trying to prove he's a leader or just trying to rally the troops or just being on a different type of team than the Padres. But it seems a little different this year. One thing that I see going forward is, Corbin Burns against Luis Gil. I'm taking Corbin Burns.
Yep.
Kyle Bradish and John Means come back in the next 2 games after that. And Bradish, his velo was not back to normal on his rehab. So there's a little bit more riding on that than I think they might have expected, or than maybe people realize. I think that they are a World Series contender if Bradish can pitch to 90% of where he was last year. But John Means himself, sometimes doesn't strike anybody out, but sometimes still gets the outs. Like, can they get along? Is it more the Rangers package where they're just going to slug and just figure out the pitching?
Maybe. I mean, they got Burns for this very reason, right?
Exactly,
but you're right. They still could use another starter. Maybe they do that at the deadline, right? I don't know.
There's that opportunity. And then one last thing I just wanted to point out real quick that's kind of funny because we were talking about this in terms of rivalries. My son is reading like a graphic novel that's like historical. I'm not, my worst foot forward as a baseball writer and analyst is history. Like, I don't know it that well. I came to this country. Like I didn't, it doesn't grab me as much as maybe other people. I didn't know this before. And sorry if everybody knows this, but the Yankees were originally the Orioles. Did you know that? I didn't know that. So the Yankees were originally the Orioles, and then the Orioles went defunct. And in 1903, the Orioles were purchased and moved to New York and renamed the New York Highlanders. So that is kind of an origin story for a rivalry. It's like, kind of like we were the same team at one point. But I just thought that was a cool little side angle to this budding rivalry, as we put it.
Yeah, that's one little twist in franchise history that I actually had not previously read. If you look at every franchise's history page,
oh my God,
teams at least
here's a tiny bit of trivia.
Yeah,
so there were 13 Charger members in the American League and the National League, and some of them have stayed in their same city, but only one of the American League, the original 13, only one of the teams has stayed in their same city and kept their same name.
Boston.
Is it
Boston?
It's not Boston.
I think they were like the Red Stockings, or like there's
right. They were the Red Stockings, which I still consider the Red Sox.
I know it's really close. So it's kind of a nitpicky kind of bit of trivia, but there's one team that kept their name the whole way through, and it's Tigers. Surprising.
The Tigers?
It's the Tigers.
Yeah.
Oh.
Everybody else had like different names, and a lot of them moved cities.
Yeah.
Even these Orioles were originally the St. Louis Browns.
Yes. Yes. I've been on that beat for 9 years. I was familiar, probably more than anyone, with the history.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to note, and there definitely is a rivalry. The atmosphere, the last two nights doesn't remind you of like an early May game at all. It's, these games matter to Orioles fans. And I think they matter to the Yankees now. For a long time, it was a very one-sided rivalry. Right. The Yankees would just come in and fill the stadium and
What's
win.
The Mad Men thing? I don't think about you at all.
Yeah.
Speaking of getting pretty heated, though, for this time of year, Brewers Rays, like two organizations that are very similar. I mean, they're the Spider-Man meme in a lot of ways.
The beginning of that, I missed that.
Well, so I think it was just a Chris Guccione ump show for most of the game. Freddie Peralta was pitching well. Jose Siri hit a home run off him early in the game. The Brewers were up big, and Peralta with a 3-0 pitch hit Siri in the upper thigh, like a running inside fastball that just missed badly. And he was really
Peralta doesn't have great command.
Peralta was really good last night, and they showed the replay of the home run, and they asked him about it after the game. Jose Siri didn't really do much of anything after he hit the home run. He flipped the bat a little, slowly walked out of the box, and jogged around the bases. Like, it was nothing out of the ordinary. There were a couple hit batters in the fifth. I think Harold Ramirez and Rhys Hoskins got hit. So the pitch that hit Siri was the third hit batter in like 2 innings, and they started to think there was like a beanball war developing maybe. But even in this post-game comments, Chris Guccione didn't really do himself any favors. You could dig into that kind of on the side. But then it got even crazier. Bedtime happened in the Van Riper household. I come back downstairs and I see highlights of Abner Uribe throwing punches at Jose Siri. So Siri grounds out. Uribe covers the bag. It's not even a close play. And you could tell Uribe says something to him based on where the camera is. I don't know if Siri said anything first, but Uribe says something, kind of whips the ball over to one of his infielders, and then bench is clear and have to try to separate these two guys, which is, I have no idea where all that came from. We may never know, but the Brewers have had a few random calls kind of working against them. They had one on Monday night. There was Jake Bauers followed through on a strike 3 and clipped Rene Pinto in the back of the head with his backswing. But it would have been a wild pitch where the runner on third would have scored, but there was a dead ball because of it. Pat Murphy got ejected. Then he got ejected on Tuesday after all the crazy stuff that was happening. So tempers have been running a little hot in Milwaukee here over the last couple of weeks. But this was a series we had circled that has just gone completely in a different direction.
If there's maybe both these teams have a strong narrative of disrespect. Like the
just a chip on their shoulder.
Yeah, chip on their shoulder kind of. It might make sense because if you think about it, maybe these two organizations don't get as much respect as they should. Maybe that's something that's aligned with them. It's like, yes, they don't spend as much, but also, another thing that's common is that, I myself did not think the Brewers were a candidate to win this division this year. And even projection systems don't love the Brewers a lot of times. And like, the Rays, they have like one reporter, like you like think about it in terms of media too. Like how many people cover those two teams?
Yeah,
Fair.
that's fair.
Fair.
Dodgers D-backs was the other series we were going to talk about. We don't have time. There was a B delay.
It's
That was
amazing.
great.
Let's just talk about the bees. And then the best part, I thought, was that the beekeeper threw out the first pitch.
That's so good.
What a
really like
day!
that.
Yeah.
He was
And
apparently
then someone
at
made
his
an
son's-
MLB logo with the beekeeper in it.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. He was apparently at his son's little league game. Like, talk about like a call, right? He's watching his kid play little league, gets a call. It's like, you're needed at work.
Yeah.
You're needed.
Well-
There's a bee situation, which I don't know if that happens a lot. Is
Yeah,
that
like
in beekeeping?
emergency bees.
Yeah.
An emergency
Somebody
bee
knew to call
situation?
him, so he might have been called
Yeah,
before. And
Then he gets there, and it's at the stadium. You know what I mean? And then the next thing he knows, they're like, "Well, so you saved the game. Can you throw out the first pitch?" Like, what a day!
Yes, you're at the game. You get the call. You're like, who is this? The D-backs. What do you need? What's going on? Oh,
It
bees.
seems like uniquely
How
a
much?
baseball-y kind of situation. Like,
Yes.
can you imagine, like, what would they do in a football game if the guy came and got rid of the bees? Like, is there
Well,
a
where would the
ceremonial
bees
first pitch? There's
live?
no way to like celebrate the beekeeper.
Yeah, that's
Is he
true.
gonna, like,
Coin flip? Would he coin flip?
Well, yeah, you'd flip the coin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You get to go on the field for the coin toss.
Yeah.
yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. Also, the stadiums are not set up for bees. Where would the bees live?
Right. Yeah. I'm a little surprised they lived. Was it in LA or was it in Arizona?
This was in Arizona.
Yeah.
I'm a little surprised. I mean, how often is that roof open? But
I
the
don't
know.
bees found their way in.
They're going to find their way in. Yeah. It was an exciting game last night, too. Christian Walker hit 2 homers, including a walk-off, evening out that series. Dodgers
For the
sort of ran things on Monday night. Maybe there's going to be like a B night now. There you go. It's going to be unusual delay series jerseys. They'll get to that before they stop making extra jerseys.
I beg of the Diamondbacks to not bring live bees into the dugout as celebrations.
Oh my God! That would be that'd be worse than the old sausage.
might be funny, but would also be terrifying at the same time. We have to go on our way out the door. A reminder: you can get a subscription to The Athletic at theathletic.com/rates and barrels. Find Britt on Twitter at Britt_Giroli. Find Eno at Enoceris. Find me at Derek Van Riper. Find the pod at Rates and Barrels. We are back with you on Thursday.
Thanks for listening.